So, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of In Conversation With. If you're joining us over on Friday night on the Azure Live Twitch.tv channel, thanks so much for tuning in. Please do take part in the chat below, and don't forget to give the channel a follow. That way you'll get notified next time we go live with more content. Equally, if you're watching this on catch up on YouTube, please don't forget to click that like button, hit the subscribe button. It really is so much appreciated. Okay, so my next guest this week, he is a multi-year Microsoft MVP before he joined Microsoft, and he's now helping businesses as a cloud solutions architect over there with Microsoft. He's an active part of the Azure user group over in Belgium, and today we're going to put a little bit of focus on the DevSecOps area and dig into the Azure Security Centre a little bit. So with that being said, I'd like to welcome my next guest on In Conversation With is Mr. Mike Martin. So, hey Mike, how you doing? Thanks for joining me.
Hey John, and thanks for having me. Having a blast already.
Oh, great. No, absolutely. No, it's a pleasure. It's great. Thanks so much for reaching out. I know you're about to do a talk whenever this video goes out, but you're going to do a talk for me at the Welsh Azure user group. And yep. I know we had a quick chat about setting up one of these sessions because I've seen some of your other stuff you've been doing over the, well, you've been doing this for longer than I can remember, I guess, Mike. So I think that the honor is all mine, obviously. Thanks so much for joining me. So
I wouldn't say honor, but I mean,
well,
you're right. I've been doing this way too long. I mean, I've been into this Azure thing since the early days. So yeah,
well, that's cool.
You see, the mileage is showing.
No, not at all, Mike. I think it's just good to get a voice of experience, isn't it? Now and again, to talk some sense to people like me that is just trying hard. I think is probably fair to say. So no, I'm really excited to get stuck into our conversation topic today. But before we do that, I don't know if you just want to give yourself a proper little intro. Just let people know what you've been up to for the last few years or so.
Cool. First of all, I'm Belgian. I'm sorry about that. I mean, lots of people always say avoid the Belgians, especially MVP leads. They tend to do that for some reason. I don't know why.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a long story, but we had this one thing happening at the MVP summit, and the MVP community lead at that time, Mark Brown, he said, and by the way, if you go out at night, MVPs stay clear of the Belgians. And we made our name for some reason. And at that point in time, me and a friend stepped in, and we made a name. It really happened. So
fair enough. It's going from strength. I know. Well, I know the Azure Belgium Azure community is going from strength to strength. There's some fantastic people out there. So yeah,
that's true.
It's all good. It's going well.
Yeah. It's really going well. I mean, we are still. We were one of the earlier ones in Europe. We had a couple of pioneers in there. The founding fathers, let's say, were actually one of the first Azure MVPs that were reconverted from ASP.NET MVPs typically. So, and there still are. I mean, there's still Yves who live, and there's still Maarten Baljouw. And the third original one is no longer with us in the Azure user group. He's still alive, don't worry. But
good to hear. Yeah.
But he's no longer with us as a community lead. He's still doing a lot of things with Azure, but he moved on with other focuses. So and hence why since then we have 7 crew members doing that thing. And for myself, I'm love to be a part of that. I mean, that was actually my jump board, my springboard into the community and even to the MVP ship. So that's pretty cool. And for today, I am a happy CSA, as they call it. I'm a cloud solution architect, focusing on not on customers but on partners. So we have two. There's 2 sides on Microsoft. There's actually 3 sides. There's engineering. That does everybody, and they have customers and partners. And I'm focusing on the partner side, where we do together with the partners, we try to build solutions for their customers, or even make the partners build solutions that they can reproduce at customers, so that we have solution offering based upon our technologies. In between those, there are also what we call the ISVs, or the independent software vendors, and there's so many of them. And I try to service them to by guiding them in making the best technology solutions selections for their own solutions buildings. So they are typically the next Spotifys of this world that are building a SaaS platform or a PaaS platform, and they want to build a new business model behind that. And typically people like me, they go in and help them guide technology wise. We also have some business guidance there. And together we try to build with them solutions that they can offer onto the market so that everybody can consume them. And there's some very successful ISVs in there. I mean, you probably, I don't know if you're using an EID solution, but in Belgium we have one of the first EIDAS certified solutions that can be used all over Europe as an digital identity provider, which is called It's Me. And they're very, very successful. And it replaces the EID as a token on your cell phone, and it can really prove that you are you, because there's an entire flow of identity and authorization and authentications behind it. We can use it to log into our health system. We can use it to log into our federal government systems like taxes and all these things. It's really, really cool. So it's that kind of partners that I'm actually focusing on today, together with my little group in the world.
Cool. So it's pretty much on the security side of things, identity and access management, things like that.
That's one example that is really doing a lot of on the security side. But I'm also targeting partners that are doing healthcare stuff. I'm actually working with a Belgian company that has a lot of site tracking in the UK also, and they're working with the NHS together. So I do, but I do they have me in there because, first of all, of my experience of building SaaS software and migrating workloads into the cloud. But second of all, also because I slap people around when they're doing security wrong.
Yeah, so absolutely. Yeah.
And then they come to me, and then we have the discussions of the things you better don't do those, and you don't want to end up like the next, I don't know whether you've been following the news the last couple of days, but there was a huge software supply chain attack inside of Kaseya, which is unfortunately for them, which is a endpoint management system, a little bit like Intune or whatever, which pushes and manages other systems. And apparently hackers got hold of that system, and they are now using this to push ransomware into other customers.
Yeah, sure.
And that happened over the weekend, and like in Sweden, the entire supply chain for groceries, because there's a retailer called Coop, and they're totally impacted. They had to close all their stores because of their point of sale systems going like down. Because of ransomware.
I did see that. That did come over to the UK, because I believe there's some of the co-op. It's the cooperative, isn't it? It's I think I did notice some of that. It's not great. You see too many of these stories. I don't know whether it's just they seem to get the spotlight at the moment, or these kind of things have been going on for a long time. It's just social media kind of enhances that. I don't know.
No. I see a trend, and I don't want to worry people too much, but I see something happening, and I think they're moving on to the big warfare. Actually, let's call it like that. We are because this week marks a very important week for cybersecurity. A lot of people don't realize it, but there's a global simulation on cyber attacks on the 9th of July. Which they're going to do a global. It's a little bit like a military exercise that all countries come together and do a war games, and they're going to do the same thing on a global scale this weekend. So the 9th. So, and I just hope that I'm wrong, touching wood here. I hope that I'm wrong, but I think the dark side guys, the red team guys, are actually preparing to use that as a masking, because we've seen SolarGate, we've seen other ransomware attacks going on lately. We've seen that Kaseya thing. We've seen more of these random injections. We've seen unfortunately the Exchange exploit that a lot of people were impacted by when still running their own Exchange servers. So I don't know. We'll see, but I hope I'm wrong.
I know what you're saying. I mean, it's even more prevalent as well. I got wind of that, and news. I don't know how true it was or not, but LinkedIn as well. They also had a bit of a huge data breach.
No,
I don't know.
That wasn't really. So you need to put that one with a grain of salt, or like an entire pot of salt. So what happened there is actually not a real data breach. So what they did is they, in a legal way, with a lot of time and with a little bit of tape, they actually scraped all the data through the official APIs.
Mm-hmm.
What we should have done, on the other hand, because LinkedIn is Microsoft, right? What we should have done, in my eyes, was making sure that this activity could have been monitored by using the correct tools.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing really like penetrated or got hacked and abused and breached for real.
Yeah.
And that's the most important part. And people they see a lot of data went out. Yeah, sure. But I can just call any kind of data as soon as you put it publicly in your profile. I can just scrape that.
Yeah,
No,
sure.
just an API call away. And you're allowed to do that as a developer because you have access. If you say, I'm going to sign up as a developer and I'm going to read out your profile through the API, I can do that because I'm allowed to. I registered myself as a developer, and that's a free service. I mean, you can just use those things. It's like any other REST API that you have in the world. So is that a security breach? No. Could it have been monitored better? Yes, totally agree.
Yeah, and I guess, like you say, LinkedIn being Microsoft, but it's not related to one vendor or another. Similar things have happened with Facebook and Twitter over the years, and it's like you say. I guess we're all kind of growing together. With all of a sudden, we've got these huge silos of data where like you say, access via a public API to scrape, one or two profiles may seem insignificant, but if you're doing it on a mass scale, all of a sudden, there are some question marks, I suppose, that get raised. And look, I guess as an industry, we're kind of all growing to understand these a bit better. I guess is that the best way to say it? Would you say, Mike? Or
I think we can state that safely. We can put that statement up safely. Yeah, I mean, we only grew the internet the last 20 years, right? We came out of the bubble out in the late 90s, in the early 2000s, and a lot of things changed over the years, and we are consuming the internet in a different way than we used to do in the beginning. The beginning was just messaging in between, but now we're hooking up everything and we are connecting everything, and we want to make it easy on people. And you just want to make sure, and that's a little bit the ISV talking here. You want to make it easy to people, and you want to say, "Here, shut up. Here's my credit card. Take my money and let me consume." But sometimes that comes out wrong by not guarding enough or putting rules out in a totally wrong way, or not being compliant with some things because you have no clue what you're doing. And that's with the best defense to people who are doing something, but typically those things only come to their knowledge or to their conscience once they're into that, and not beforehand. So, and that's something that we need to make people aware of.
It's hindsight, isn't it? Hindsight is a wonderful thing, I think, is probably the best way to put it. And it's so striking, actually, because I was having a chat only the other day on another podcast with a fellow community member, and we were talking about cybersecurity. Now, I turned around to him and I said, look, I, as a consultant or an architect, I never sort of had my roots in security. That was always that other person's job to look at, security. I was an applications sort of person. So, and I think it's probably fair to say over the years, especially with the rise of cloud, with, if we just look at just the Microsoft offerings from 365 into Azure, security features and products have kind of now been baked in to the solutions. So when you're out there doing some, contracting or architecting, whatever it is that you may be doing, you're inherently having to now start to talk security. Now, rightly or wrongly, for me personally, that's kind of become something that I've kind of had to, adopt. And I guess it comes back maybe to this element of training and like you say, understanding of why are we speaking about these security features and why are they so important to talk about. So, I mean, maybe we'll kick off into that, Mike. I mean, talking about, we've highlighted some key things that have gone on over the last few weeks as to why security is such a hugely hot topic and everybody should be thinking about it in a bit more of a proactive manner. I mean, should we just get started in terms of, we hear about this whole DevOps movement, the DevOps way of working, where all of a sudden people people like myself who are traditionally operations based are now coming closer to the kind of the dev world.
Mhm.
How does security fit into that, and how do we start to try and leverage those kind of conversations and make them meaningful and actually practical, that they actually end up in solutions? What's your take on that, Mike?
So, okay, let me first start off with security is like an onion. It's not an ogre thing, right? I'm not doing the Shrek thing, but it's actually true. Security is like an onion. It has layers. I always feel like Mike Myers in this case. That's an onion. But at the core of the onion, you always have like the sprout, and that sprout is actually the weakest link. And the weakest link in your entire solution that you're building, whether you're putting it, it doesn't matter where you put it. Whether you put it on premise, whether you're putting it on AWS, whether you're putting it on Azure, doesn't matter. But the weakest link is actually the total inner source of your code, because the application is really some of the weakest link in there, and also the human beings behind that. That's the first part. A couple of years ago, I had a full Azure security talk, a talk about all things that are going on in the security landscape in Azure, and that's a lot. Trust me. If I want to do that in a full session, it takes me about 4 hours to explain everything.
Sure.
But that goes from all the measurement, all the countermeasures that we're taking in Azure for all your consumers out there, and to all the things that you can apply extra, right? But there was this one image that I had, and I compared the security landscape with a matrix. And you are at a certain point, you want to become Neo, the one protector, and you want to protect all. But it always points down to one single person. It's the one who wrote that single line of code, and that's again the weakest link. So the application becomes so fragile. And luckily, the last 3 years, I've seen a lot of the security community moving away from pure operationals, also into the developer landscape. And I see the message that they're bringing, the preaching to the choir, saying we should do a shift left. So shifting left means that you need to put the security focus from the beginning of your developer lifecycle. It shouldn't become at the end. Traditionally, security is, we're going to put a firewall up. We're going to block all the IPs. We're going to do some firewall monitoring, and maybe do some intrusion detection or some heuristic scanning on everything that passes through. Is that sufficient? No, because what about insider risks and all the other stuff that is going on? So there's a lot of more going on than just doing that. So shift left starts off with, I already gave a lot of examples. SolarWind, SolarGate, that started off by injecting malicious code inside of a code that can monitor the rest of the world. That's really a software supply chain attack from within your code. So that could be a NuGet package that you're downloading. That could be an npm package that you're downloading. You inject it, you have a dependency on it. And before you know it, some guy in China, Russia, or wherever they are is hacking away from within inside of your system without anybody noticing. And that's a little bit of responsibility that you need to also put into the hands of the developer. Does that mean that they need to be wary of every single security rule? No, but you need to make them aware that there are risks involved when you're doing something. Open source is pretty, but we all know it, right? We see a piece of code on Stack Overflow. We go, I need that because my code isn't working. 5 hours later, it's still drilling away because it still doesn't work, but that's a different story. But you're taking something that you probably don't know, and you want to inject that inside of your code, and you don't know what the effect is. It's like you find a USB drive on the street and you want to inject it in your PC. The chances are that you have a virus on top of that is like real, right? So you don't want to do that. Same with your code. So you need to have code sanity and code best practices there. So, and it starts off really stupid and simple. Do code reviews. Do quality assurance. These are things that we should be doing already, or a lot of people should have already been doing it. But you also should be training your end users a little bit on the fact that they need to know, that they need to be aware of. Well, if you're doing HTTP calls, don't do them over HTTP, do them over HTTPS. It's like really these stupid things. Use TLS 1.2 at least. Going on, work up the thing, HTTP2. Try to work up to the latest security standard, even from code. And we, I mean, I work for Microsoft and I have it easy. I mean, we provide these kind of tools to the world. I mean, we have like a security intelligence for .NET, where you can just have best coding practices when it comes down to writing code for ASP.NET and Azure and all these things. So you can use that. So there's a free downloads that you can have, the Rosalind analyzer that inject inside of Visual Studio, and they just start analyzing your code while you're working with it. And they just give you highlights and say, oh, you're using that method, but that's unsafe because if you're using like a randomizer, it's an unsafe method to do a cryptography, and it will give you a bad SHA token or something like that. So it's all these things that it can do and that it can help you. So from a developer's perspective, you don't have to change that much, but it will guide you into better principles and better practices. That's the first thing. Yeah. And then once you are doing that, next to that, you also should have something like a heuristic, like it's not really a SAST tool because SAST only come into the, so a security analysis or static coding tool. That you have. So that scans your code for security vulnerabilities on dependencies and all these things. And there's a plethora of tools that you can use for that. I mean, Microsoft has that now with GitHub in CodeQL. We do that. So I don't know whether you know CodeQL.
No, I don't. And I think it's probably fair to say from a development point of view, what we're talking about is when you are developing that application or whatever it is, that code base that's in your Git repository, these analysis tools are effectively just like plugins, bolt-ons that we can use to scan in real time as you're typing through this document, and it'll come up with a little alert that'll say, not best practice, or that looks good to me. Is that what we're talking, Mike?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. So and it's these things that will make the developer life easier and more secure. Let me just, since I'm on screen anyway, I'm just going to open up my Git. I'm going to show you something. That way you can actually see what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I'll flick over to the desktop
I just took you there. So you know GitHub, right? And GitHub has a lot of cool features, but one of the cooler features that we have today in GitHub is that it has an advanced security suite inside. And one of the things that we are doing a lot is doing that scanning from the moment that you do a check-in or do a pull request. We're going to scan your code if you set up a security flow. And you can do this easily by going to the security tab inside of your GitHub repository. You have this, you see this little code scanning? Let me just make this a little bit bigger because that way it's more readable. There you go. That should be nice and readable on the screen, I think. So you see this little code scanning alerts. So if I click on this thing, you will see all the different alerts that it has based upon the code that is inside of my repository. And that can be for any language. I mean, you can have your own queries against that language if you want to, but we can detect already lots of these languages for you. So if you have a repository, you will actually see that if you set it up, you can set up more code scanning tools here. It's the easiest way to set it up. The first thing that it does, the choice of going with CodeQL. So this is CodeQL analysis. So this is natively, it's a company that we bought that had a name like Semel, and this is something that you can do. And what this actually does, it does kind of a, you can compare it with a SQL query against your code, and it will look for all the weak references that it knows against a validated database of all the different things that can go wrong or that you shouldn't be doing, and it will scan about these things. And if you set this up, this will generate you a YAML file. And now this is the Juice Shop weak application. So Juice Shop is specifically made for hacking and for recognizing OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. So
Right.
OWASP is an open group with open web vulnerabilities and security principles. You can have things like SQL injection, cross-site scripting, all these things that are there, and there's a set of rules that are being generated behind that. It's a community that is very vivid, and everybody can contribute to that. And this application is actually using all these OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities to highlight the weaknesses inside of an application and how you can mitigate those also. So you learn with it. You learn how to hack with this tool, but you also learn how to mitigate and become a better developer from this thing.
Cool.
So,
yeah.
And since this is based on JavaScript and Node.js, it will actually recognize, as you can see here, it will recognize that it uses the JavaScript language, as you can see here. So immediately GitHub recognizes this is JavaScript repository. I will use this kind of a template, and you can just do start commit, and then it will start building your code again by means of the CodeQL analysis. So I can show you this, what it does in the actions part. And don't worry about it. There's a lot of red in there. I'm still working on something because I want, but as you can see, I have a CodeQL here. And if I open this one, so this is the one that I scanned 2 days ago. What it does one single job, and it does an analysis, and it gives you an output of all the different scans that it does.
Yeah, sure. So it's like, a typical CI/CD pipeline, effectively just giving you those stages that it's going through.
And this will scan your entire code baseline. And if we then take a look at, it will generate some pull requests depending on how you configure it, or it will generate you some issues depending on the configuration of your entire thing. So what you have here is in your project, you will actually be able to see all the different things that are being added, and it can be security issues that are immediately being generated by CodeQL or by any other CI/CD tool that you have in there. So that's a little bit the flow that you should work up to. So that way it becomes an intrinsic part of your code reviewing. So it's not, you don't only have to action it by doing it, but you also need to apply afterwards the mitigations that you need to take a look at and say, oh yeah, we're having this dependency issue. If we take a look here, we're having a security issue on, and there we go. So this is white source, but if I'm now taking a look at CodeQL, where is it? And I should better just take a look at security here. So code scanning. So let's say I have an uncontrolled data using path expression. So if I open up this, I will go to the code. It will show me the path. It will give me a probable recommendation here. It can give me a probable recommendation, and from here I can start actually a new pull request. I can open an issue and start working with the vulnerabilities that are in here. As you can see, there's some vulnerabilities that are highlighted here. They're connected to a international database of vulnerabilities that are connecting in code, and that way you can see what is the possible solution to manage these things. And if we go further in these things, and it doesn't always only stop in the code itself, you also have that for dependencies that you create on packages, for instance. Like we have packages here, there's an issue, a high severity issue on Grunt. If I open this up, you will actually see that this version should be updated to 1.3. Why? Because there's actually in 1.1 a vulnerability recognized, which can give you, as you can see, there's probably some issues there. So you can look up that CVE, and then you can start working on top of that. So this is where the developer actually needs to take action and make sure that he understands the full responsibility of the things that he is implementing inside of the code. And that way he can work around with things like, I need to make sure that my website is addressing HTTPS. I need to make sure that I don't do a non-parameterized SQL queries, but I need to make sure that they are variables that we pass on, that then they get validated, and all these things. So to make our code more secure. So this is one of the things
that makes so much more sense now you've explained that to me, Mike. I mean, in terms of, when we talk security, a lot of the time, I guess, I'm speaking for myself here, but with security is such a huge and wide-ranging thing. It's almost, where do you start? Where do you start talking about security? You know, what is the use case? What is this? What is that? And you can go off and run down so many rabbit holes. But I mean, to kind of clear this up in my mind, you know, when we talk about shifting left and bringing security into the forefront of that developer's mindset, using GitHub, we've got these scanning and assessment tools built in that will make that dev's life a lot happier, I guess, is what we're saying in terms of it's kind of there on a plate. You can look, you can scan your code, you can see what vulnerabilities have been detected, and then that dev, you know, whether they're a security expert or not, they have got a starting point. They've got a place to take action from, like you say. And that's cool.
Exactly.
That's brilliant to see, to be honest, Mike. Yeah.
And if you don't have these enterprise queue, because this is like paying an option, right, in GitHub. So it's advanced security, so you pay for those things. But typically, an enterprise has some investment in any kind of tool, whatever you call it, whether it's Visual Studio, whether it's Azure DevOps, and even in Azure DevOps, we have these kind of tools available. But there's also a lot of free stuff that you can actually use to make that shift left. There's this one company that I really am a fan of, which is called Snyk.io. They have a really cool logo. It's like with a Doberman. And what they have is, they have this tooling, which can also be injected inside of Azure DevOps, which can be injected into GitHub also if you don't want to use the CodeQL stuff from there out. And they can integrate with that. And they even have, and this is really, really cool, they have a free tool that you can use from within Visual Studio Code. And this will help you to scan your code. I need to reconnect here, but that's okay. I mean, this will help you to scan your code from within okay. So this is not, this will take a little bit of a while because my code isn't loaded. Yeah. But what this does, it does a little bit the same that GoL does, but then from within the IDE, or in this case, the scripting editor, which allows you to scan immediately while coding. So you don't have to do a commit first. You can do it actually pre-commit. So there's no excuse of not implementing these kind of tools, because this extension is free. The developer part is also a community service that you can use, which comes for free. And it still uses the same security principles, the same feed. The only thing is that you have less of build minutes and all these things that are coming along. So it's a free to use queue with a limited set of build minutes. You have all the features that you can use, but it limits it to some of these extents. So, but it's very cool to use, and in combination with anything else.
But I suppose even sorry, Mike, to chip in, but even from a point of view of oh, Mike, you still there? Your screen went a bit funny then. Yeah, you're still there.
Still here.
Oh, that's okay. I think it's all the web pages are sapping the bandwidth, but I think we're good. But yeah, I got to say, even from a perspective of, if you're a large enterprise and you're well into software development, then arguably this conversation has already been had, and you're probably doing some of these best practices anyway. But if you go to the other end of the scale and you are either a new dev looking to get into the industry, doing some learnings yourself, these kind of tools, especially the free tools or the open source community tools, I take it they're a great way of getting to learn these concepts as well, Mike, in terms of just plugging them in, like you say, into VS Code, into if you've got access to another CI/CD type environment, just getting them plugged in and start having a play and run them against some of your existing test or development bits of code that you've got, and get familiar with them. Is that the best way, do you think, Mike?
Yeah, that and making sure that you can also talk to somebody who knows a little bit about it.
Sure.
That can also guide you a little bit into the best things that you should take a look at, because security is it's like fast and huge. And people literally get scared of it because, I don't know TCP/IP, or I don't know DNS.
And you know, that's the cool thing about having this conversation, to be honest, because, like I say, I've got my own experiences. Everybody's got their own view and their own experiences where they're coming from. But I think since we've seen this rise of cloud, and all of a sudden, that security boundary has kind of been decimated from that traditional, I've got it, like you said earlier, I've got a bunch of tins sat in a broom cupboard and I've got my firewall on it. Great, we can put all of that up. but like I say, since we've moved into this more cloud-centric arena where we're having to deal with lots more, sort of many more areas of attack potentially from the perspective of lots of different SaaS applications, lots of different networking environments in terms of gluing lots of networks together, because now we're in this hybrid world. It can be quite a tricky conversation to get started on. Which part do we start on? And I'm presuming this whole defense in depth mindset or kind of context still exists in today's cloud world, Mike. And I guess from a development point of view, that is where we're starting, very much at that human writing that bit of code arena. How do we make sure that they are taking on the best practices? And then we still have that whole defense in depth plethora of utilities and features that we can kind of turn on, turn off, configure, do stuff with. I'm right in thinking that, Mike, yeah?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If you're doing, so the best thing that you could do is, and that's something that's actually funny, because I think I made that statement like 5-6 years ago, even maybe 7, that I said, cloud, it enforces DevOps.
Sure.
And actually, Microsoft came to me. You shouldn't be saying that. That's wrong. I said, no, it's actually right. If you're taking a look at how you are working with cloud, it actually moves you into let's push as much as possible our deployments and change as much as possible at the same time. Why? Because we are living no longer in a static world. We're living in a very agile world. Today we all know features like feature toggles and all these things, and we can make it really easy to deploy any kind of version to any kind of person all over the world, and deliver value to these people all on different levels. We have API management that can leverage that by means of subscriptions. You're working on an older version of the API. Go ahead, knock yourself out. Here's the key. Just use it in a secure way. Oh, and speaking of keys, never put hard-coded keys inside of your code, please.
Sure.
This is also a thing for a developer again. That's also something that is very nice in GitHub, by the way. We do scanning on keys and making sure that you get alerted if there's something like that inside of the code. But that was a little sidetracking there.
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, but if you're doing CI/CD, it will make your life easier, because if you're doing a lot of DevOps practices. DevOps doesn't exist as a role. It's a culture. It's a thing that will make things like application lifecycle management, ALM, and ITIL move together, or ITIL or COBIT or whatever we have from a IT services methodology.
Yeah,
they come together and they actually form a union. And this is where the entire company that does anything related to solution building or solution delivery is being impacted. I always laugh at the adverts that they say, "Oh, we have a great DevOps engineer opening position here with us." It doesn't exist as a role. It's a false prerogative. It doesn't work. DevOps is a culture. Everybody has still their own specialties. Given that you have to learn about a little bit about cloud infrastructure, that the operations guys need to learn a little bit about cloud development, that they all need to learn a little bit about how to monitor all these things and work with that feedback loop, which is very important in DevOps, because you actually deploy, and typically DevOps stops at most companies where the deployment happens, and they don't monitor and follow up and do anything with it, because out of that monitoring, a lot of valuable telemetry and information can come back. It can be, how is my software being used, up until the fact that we're seeing trends here. It's scaling at certain points in time based back on application insight. For instance, we can actually pin that down to a certain kind of usage in code or a query, and we can optimize that code again. And we go back into the beginning of our feedback loop, seeing we need to redesign some of our features of our software, and the entire show starts up again. That's DevOps in a nutshell. Delivering value to everybody who's working with it or being impacted by that tool. Now, this means that we will do no longer a 3-month cadence of releases, but that we will do a cadence of 3 releases per hour, per minute, whatever you have.
Sure.
This also means that we need to make sure that the automation system behind it is also being put very secure. So we make sure that those who have access only have access to the sources that they are allowed to have access to, that the stakeholders only can read, that they cannot change, and so on and so on. It starts off there for the security point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Then we move on to the CI/CD. We need to make sure that we do these things automatically, like I just demonstrated you with the code quilting. This can go within a CI/CD or in an GitHub Actions or in an Azure DevOps pipeline, doesn't matter. Or even Jenkins, if you want to feel miserable and waste your Monday mornings with a lot of coffee. Yeah. I mean, Jenkins is a cool tool, but it's such a pain to maintain. Really, you can do so many beautiful things, but those guys who are maintaining that, they're really masochists. I mean, they should have bad weekends or something. I don't know. But in the end, it comes down to that you want to also not only deliver good software, but you also want to safely deliver that into your cloud infrastructure where you're hosting your applications. And that's the last line where you're moving. First of all, how are you connecting to that cloud? Don't do that with a user. Use managed identities. Use service principals if you can, or not at all. Just pick them up, put all your secrets inside of a key vault, and make sure that no one ever has access to those specific users or the specific tokens or the specific security principles, and that they can just pick them up with key vault, be authenticated, put everything in there, and then just move it that way into Azure without any human interaction. And that's a little bit the thing people still need to learn. And today we offer a lot of great stuff. There was a great video a couple of weeks ago in the 425 show by Christos Matskas. He's one of the guys that is a face of the community when it comes down to identity. He used to live in the UK. Very cool guy. He's a Greek who lived in the UK and now moved to Seattle. Awesome
we had Christos on the Welsh Azure user group not so long ago. Yeah, giving us some great examples of identity and how to bring identity into your applications.
Yeah, and he talked specifically about using managed identities within the usage between GitHub Actions and Azure DevOps, because then you have no responsibility on the identity that you need to manage on top of that. Nobody can capture that identity and you do it to use it to do bad things inside of your Azure environments. Because if you have an identity and that has a contribution RBAC role, you're in deep trouble if somebody grabs that. So these are things that you need to maintain. And then we move on to the next mile of that thing is monitoring the entire part and making sure that happens in a correct way. So if we're deploying, make sure that you set policies. Policies will actually gate your deployments if bad things happen or if they don't comply with the governance structure that you have on top of it, with the compliance that you put on top of it. So compliancy and regulations then become a part where lawmaking, but also IT operations and governments can actually have their say in the way you're going to deploy your applications inside of Azure. Does that mean that you need to be limited as a developer? No, you get all the freedom. The only thing that is that you need to maintain some rules of engagement. But these are for the best. And everybody can just work together on those and everybody can design the policies. And we have mechanisms to help you with that. We have something called the Cloud Adoption Framework, which will set out these guidelines if you are in a certain compliancy era, where you can just immediately inject Azure policies for ISO, SIS benchmarking.
Well, I think don't Azure they have set up a standard blueprint, like an Azure baseline. I think an initiative.
Yes, we do. We have
Azure policy as well.
Yeah, and we have a Azure Security benchmark in there too. And this brings me up to something which is very dear to me. I have a very good relationship with the old code name Project Rome. And I don't know if you've ever heard the project code name Rome before.
No, I've not heard of it. No,
but you do know the product name today, which is called Microsoft Azure Security Centre.
Right. Okay, that was its code name. Rome, was it? Okay.
Rome.
Okay.
That's the initial code name of. It's already being reused for another project already, but that was the initial.
As in, it wasn't built in a day, I guess.
Exactly.
Just like security.
And it changed a lot over the years. And I'm a very proud technical editor for this book, actually, because I did the full technical reviewing for this one for edition 1 and 2. The third one that somebody else did, but the second edition I did together with Yuri. Yuri is a very cool guy who owns the community around Azure Security Centre. And the one thing that is very important when we talk about Azure Security Centre is the thing that you have when it comes down to compliancy. And the compliancy is where the policies actually that you set can also be used from a developer's perspective, but also when it comes down to regulatory compliance, when you need to maintain a certain standard against your end customers, or even when you are legally bound to something. This can be very, very interesting from that perspective. And we have a lot of compliance policies already set. It's just another policy that you set with Azure Blueprinting. But these are specifically for security highlights. And as you can see, the Azure Security Benchmark, which can then just point back to network security. And I did a very bad job in my subscription, but this is on purpose, by the way.
Lots of red crosses, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So, and as you can see, it will give you all the specific control details that you need to implement, and like what kind of compliances that you need to maintain. Like, for instance, here, storage account should be restricting networking access and all these things. So these will hook up to a certain compliancy standard that you can use. Now, these same things, these same policies, if you specifically enable them and you do a CI/CD on top of that subscription, your deployments will be gated if they not meet those policies. So this is really useful from a CI/CD perspective. Now we go a little bit further in with Security Centre also, because Security Centre is a very cool tool and it's changed so much over the last 4 years. One of the cooler things that we have today is everything with regards to Azure Defenders. Which are
so Mike, before we go into that, so from a security center, so to turn on as your security center, am I right in thinking it's actually on? And do we need to just do we need to select which subscriptions we want to view? Do we get an option to limit it down to a specific set of data?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So you typically start off by depends on how you start yourself in the portal, but it goes on to all the subscriptions that you selected by viewing by default.
Sure.
So you have this subscription, but you can even just say if you only have one subscription, you will only see one, right? But typically you will get an overview on everything in regards to all the subscriptions that you have any kind of saying into. And as you can see here, for instance, I have access to multiple subscriptions and multiple management groups, because you can set it on a management group level, or you can set it on a subscription level. And to give you an idea, by default, you said it's on. You're absolutely right. The free version is on, and you should be using it at least to check how your secure score is. Will you ever reach your 100%? No. And that is not the goal, but try to make sure that you stay as sane as possible and try to implement the low-hanging fruit to make your security posture better. Because that's the entire goal. But as you can see, there's a lot of things that you can set and enable, because by default you have Azure Defender off or Azure Defender on. Wax on, wax off. It's sorry, lame joke. By default, Security Centre just does secure score and a continuous assessment of your environment. If you enable Defender, you will also get these nice features like just-in-time VM access, adaptive application controlling, the things that are the regulatory compliance things. It will check for the regulatory compliance, but you will not see it. You will not get those reports and all these things. So you should be enabling it, because it will give you more bang for buck. Now, typically people go like, yeah, but that's expensive, right? Look at it this way. If you don't do it, what's the cost if you have a security issue?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, change that way of thinking.
Yeah, and do at least a monitoring of the things that you are doing. I mean, the beauty of the enablement of Azure Defender and Security Center is that you enable something, and as long as you don't consume the resources that are being enabled by Azure Defender, you don't pay anything for it.
So just can
Okay?
you clear one thing up for me now, Mike, in terms of Azure Defender?
Sure.
So that recently, from my recollection, had a bit of a brand and a name change, and there's
Yeah.
lots of different Defender products. Have you got a simple way to remember that, what Azure Defender is versus Defender for Endpoint and, the OS side,
So
things like that?
everything falls under the XDR branch. So we do a full Defender range that we have. And we have M365 Defender, which does everything in regards to Office and Windows. And then we have Azure Defender, which does everything in regards to Azure resources. That's simple.
Sure.
And what we do here is what we can do is put all the telemetry that we gather together inside of the same alerting mechanism inside of the Azure Security Graph, and then we can raise that data back into something we call Sentinel, for instance, or Splunk, or whatever you have. In Azure Defender, we do typically the VM monitoring with endpoint, but not Azure, but not Endpoint Defender, but Azure Defender for Endpoint. It's a little bit different, so it has a kind of the same name, but it works only on. But the licensing comes along with that. You can still use Endpoint Defender from the Microsoft 365 stack.
But effectively, we can call Defender for Endpoint is effectively the traditional. I don't know if I'm saying this the best way, but the traditional antivirus malware scanning agent utility that sits on the client, ATP. Yeah.
ATP, so Advanced Threat Protection for machines. So the server, laptops, these things.
Sure thing.
We have them today.
Understood.
So, and then everything else we have here is threat management and threat detection for services like app service, SQL databases, SQL servers on VMs, which comes a little bit together with the server part, but we also do scanning and the conditional data access on the VMs for SQL servers. So the things that we have in Azure SQL databases as a native service, we also have in SQL servers, and we can bring that data back. And then we also have that for open source databases. So for all 4 SKUs, storage, it's Azure storage firewall, it's Azure threat detection, it's people who are accessing it, brute forcing on the storage accounts, all these things. Kubernetes, we check on the best practices of deployment of Kubernetes, best injection of security inside of Kubernetes. Container registries getting scanned, so we scan the images that you are pushing inside of the container registries, but we also do real-time scanning in Kubernetes of your containers, so there's also that. And then Key Vault, looking on who's accessing with all these things, Resource Manager, looking on who can create stuff, and then DNS. So those are the offerings that we have today in Defender, and more stuff will probably come. This is a continuous investment that we're doing inside of our Zero Trust approach, and this really can help you in a long shot. And the beauty of this all is we now also have something really cool in combination with CI/CD in Azure Security Center on the Defender part. Because if you take a look at the integrations part, there's a new feature now since built actually that we announced. We have the CI/CD vulnerability scanning. So remember I talked to you about container registry scanning. We can actually now integrate that in CI/CD and use that as a gated feature against our CI/CD pipeline by scanning the registry and the image before we actually push it inside of the registry.
Okay, interesting.
Withhold it and bring it back into security scanning, saying, look, this image is bad because of these and these reasons. So this is a little bit the things that we're doing. It's very easy to integrate. You just need to set up you just press this button, and then you go inside of, as you can see here, yeah, so you get a token, you get a connection string that you need to set up, and then you need to set up a CI/CD pipeline into GitHub Actions. And this is really stupid and simple piece of code, but if you take a look at the actions here, and this is what it will do. Here we have it. It's this one. I'm just going to go down to the latest stable build. That's this one.
Oh, so it does actually create a new workflow within GitHub itself then?
Yeah, so now you need to create it yourself, and you need to paste in the new action inside of the workflow itself. And I'm going to show you in a second what it looks like. But you can see this here. There's a build container image vulnerability detection. So it will show up green if you don't withhold it. So I let it go. But here we can actually see that the scanning itself will just use something called Trivy, which is an injection, and it will give you all the CVEs and all the things that are happening inside of your container and give you an overview. And this information will be pushed back inside of Security Center, and it will show you CI/CD issues found during the build of your container.
So you can, so literally all those checkboxes where we would turn in features on for all the different types of components and things that we can put into Azure. This integration will pull all of that information from your Git repos as well, and I guess it'll present it in a nice form, give us that kind of RAG, that red, amber, green status with recommendations associated to it.
Exactly. So if you take a look in Security Center itself, you actually get and I can show you, where is it? So let's go to our inventory. Or I can go through Defender, doesn't matter. I think Defender will be easier because then I can actually show you where it is from a category perspective.
So we mentioned.
So you will, if you.
So I was going to say, so Mike, we mentioned that obviously the free bits in Security Center just give you that initial kind of overview in your secure score. To get access to all these detailed reports, you kind of need to start paying for that access and switching those things on to get this rich information.
So the issues that you can find with bad deployment, you will see in Secure Score.
Sure.
But everything which in regards to threat management, you will need Defender for.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Understood.
And this will give you the alerts that you have and all these things. And as you can see here, there's container registries, and you can see here there's the container image scanning that you have. If you click through, you can actually drill down, and actually this is a visualization of every aspect of data that is being found in Log Analytics. You can pull up the latest version through Azure Resource Graph. So if you don't want to do this through Azure Log Analytics, but you rather want to do this in a more CLI way, you can actually do this by means of Resource Graph too. So there's also this capability.
Wow. Okay.
And you can even see here the affected resources, and the affected resources here. Now there's a bug in my subscription. I'm still trying to figure it out, but I can show you what the result would look like. So it shows up healthy, but that's my fault. I think I did something wrong. But this is the thing. And normally here there should be a highlight saying, well, these are the actions that are not showing up correctly. I do have a slide on that. I can actually show you that. That way you can have a look on what it should look like. Where is that thing? I thought I had that slider. Okay, so it's not. Okay,
no, that makes sense. I get what you mean though. So this would have had some, and look, I guess with the fast pace of feature changes, there are bugs now and again that you see in the portal, and that's
but it's only on my subscription, but because I see it working for the couple of things. But as you can see here, and this actually stated, there's a CI/CD scan findings here. So that's exactly the build of my container that I had in my GitHub Actions, and this is pushing the founds up into Security Center, and normally you will actually see the number of here. So here on this, it should be here on this. Oh no, that wasn't the goal. On the piece of the page, you will actually see CI/CD issues found, and the number of issues and what kind of issues there are. So
sure,
so this will bring
like
back
that
continuous feedback back to the developers. And this is kind of the monitoring that you need to do on an active basis too. It's really cool. It's a really nice feature. I'm very fond of it, of all these little gizmos and gadgets, but it actually helps you have a better insight on how you're building your solutions and how it injects into the full subscription and what the risk is when you have any. So
But it's just that initial starting point, I guess, for anybody that if there is, even if you just switch this on and you just let it do its thing in the background, you can come in and start carving up some of this this data to kind of give you that visualization of actually where does what does your security posture look like today across your cloud assets. Now, there was, to be honest, Mike, we're hitting the hour mark now with this conversation, and I love it. We could probably do a mini series in its own right on this. There's just too much to get in. But there was one thing I just wanted to ask you quickly before we kind of bring this session to a close. But you mentioned it earlier about feeding all this data into something like Azure Sentinel, which is Azure's SIEM and SOAR system, which is that kind of orchestrator and automated response system for threat intelligence and threat analytics, I guess. Where do you see something like Azure Security Centre, draw that line between Security Centre and something like Sentinel? Because I'm aware that you can hook in a lot of other good things into Sentinel, but it's one thing that customers that I've dealt with have had that, well, should I be setting things up in Azure Security Centre? Should I be turning it all on for my servers and so on and so forth? Or should I be going down the road of a SIEM system like Sentinel? What's your views on that, Mike?
So Security Centre and Sentinel, they go hand in hand. Sure. According to me, one cannot exist without the other. Anyway, Security Centre will be used to push all the data that you need inside of log analytics. Mm-hmm. The alerts that you have need to be coming from somewhere. So the alerts are generated in Security Centre, and Sentinel will pick them up. But Sentinel does a little bit more than just visualizing it.
And I guess, sorry, Mike, to drill into that log analytics, that is that underlying storage of all these metrics that Sentinel takes its feed from. I'm right in thinking that, aren't I?
Exactly. Sure, it's one of the sources. It's one of the sources. But the beauty of it, if you're doing monitoring correctly, you will set up a log analytics workspace, and everything that you want to correlate or have an aggregate of all the data that you want to see together, you will put in the same log analytics workspace. And from there out, you can do like joint queries, just a little bit like in a SQL Server-esque environment. There's even a cheat sheet for SQL developers to do KQL. Hence why we called it also KQL, because it's a query language, which looks a little bit like ANSI SQL. So the way SQL would have been written, not like we do T-SQL or PLSQL. You first have your table, and then you have what you want to visualize, and then you at the end, instead of select star. But this Sentinel is going a lot further than Azure Security Centre. Azure Security Centre will do the alerting, will give you notifications on all the things that are happening. But if you really want to have a full intelligence view on what's going on, whether it's lateral movement, whether it's vertical movement, which is going on inside of your organization, inside of your solution, you need something like Sentinel. Sentinel uses machine learning. You can set up a full automation response in there. You can have mitigations being set up and built up with log analytics on top of that. You can do a little bit the same with Security Centre, but it will never go as broad as Sentinel, because Sentinel can dig into more resources than Security Centre alone. It can analyze activity log. It can analyze AAD movement, conditional access movement. It can be hooked inside of any kind of NVA solution that you have. So virtual network appliances, all these things, you need to have a holistic view, a 360 view on all of those resources in one single glass pane.
I saw a cool demo not too long ago, actually, Mike, and they've got a whole bunch of connectors that you can literally just hook, like you say, the third-party vendors. It looks like a really cool platform.
There's a lot of cool stuff in there. If we talk about Sentinel has, first of all, everything which is related to AAD, standard AAD, you can inject for free inside of Sentinel. So you can already take a look on what persons are logging in from regions that you don't know, or stuff like that. So there's these things. You have a lot of connectors, and I'm going to show you if it loads up a little bit quickly, because it's seeing that we're almost at the hour.
No, we're good. We're
there's
good.
indeed
You know,
there's a lot of connectors still there that are being underestimated. I mean, you can have a connectivity to other SIEMs if you want to. There's connections into, come on.
That's quite interesting, actually, Mike, because I know there's a couple of customers of mine that I deal with use a product called QRadar, which is probably one of the more
IBM.
One of the more known SIEM systems, and that was one of the questions. And it's this translation between the messages that come from other SIEM systems. It's cool, the fact, like you just said, that integration you can pull from systems like that into something like Sentinel.
Yeah.
And, we always talk about this single pane of glass for this, that, and the other, but that's effectively what you can get to, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. So, and it's indeed, as you say, and there's more vendors like working on this actively. I mean, some of the ISVs that I've been talking about, a lot of ISVs are in there that are building connectors for Sentinel specifically. As you can see, there's Akamai, for instance, everything which is related to their CDN. All the events that are related to security. I don't know whether you know Akamai very well, but it can be used as a CDN offering inside of Azure. And we have 3 CDNs. We have Azure CDN, we have a Verizon CDN, Edgecast of the past, and then we have Akamai. And Akamai has a really cool feature. It can be used as a DDoS volumetric offloading mechanism. Inside of their offering. So you can actually use it as a mitigation against DDoS attacks. All those security telemetry events can actually be read inside of Sentinel, and it will prepare you for like a global scale attack that you can actually predict then, because you will see some of the things happening already in relation to that. So that's really, really cool. And there's a lot, as you can see, there's things for Atlassian, there's things for Azure Active Directory, Defender puts in there. So all the things that I've talked about can actually be hooked in here. And all that data can then be used to track all the incidents that are happening inside of your solution. And then you can start doing like investigations on all the data that is coming from all these different systems. And Sentinel is intelligent enough to put one and one together and give you a graph kind of a view on top of all your security events that are happening, and where we see a correlation between a cause and an effect, and actually a something that is happening in the end. So as you can see here, for instance, we have things like we have a malicious credential theft, for instance. We have RDP, forced RDP things going on. There's a lot of things that you can actually, here, this is one of the things that we built for the Exchange issues that we have. Where was it? Exchange vulnerability. So that way we can notify people, your server has been open to that exploit. Your server is unpatched, and these are the things that are happening behind the scenes. So Eric can take a look at, for instance, the red one, malicious credential theft, and I hope this one has a nice graph behind it, because this is something I really am always. I was going to say then,
Mike, just to pick you up on something you said then, is that word correlation. I think that's, for me, that's the key thing with Sentinel, is that because you it's almost like, yeah, okay, great. Why do I want to hook up all of these connectors to all different parts? And what was mind-blowing when I first saw this demonstration on Sentinel was that correlation is the word. Rather than you as a human being having to sift through potentially thousands upon thousands upon thousands. Look, it's probably impossible for any human to sift through those kind of metrics. Sentinel kind of does it for you using that machine learning and AI, doesn't it? And it kind of brings that end-to-end. This is going on. This is potentially an attack that's currently happening now.
Exactly.
And it's
you will see
unreal
where it's going from left to right, and on all these things that are happening. Like I opened this malicious credential theft, and I hope there's a lot of events related to that area. This is beautiful. You see? So all these things are related to, and you can zoom into this thing once it's fully loaded. And it looks
I like the way you use the word beautiful for an attack on you. So this is beautiful. Look at this one there.
Yeah, but you get a lot of information, and you actually see the effect of it immediately where it sprays out to. And that's the thing of beauty, because you will actually you will actually have a you see all the events that are hooking up to those, and it's actually a Mimikatz that is being used with a certain user that is being abused by a malicious credential that has been theft.
Yeah.
So somebody has access to a certain PC. We can open this up. We can have a timeline here of all the different events that are correlating to these. And the beauty of this thing is you recognize this immediately. If you're a developer, you actually kind of recognize the way this is looking like, because this looks a little bit like application insights, where we also detect all the different endpoints that are connecting with each other. And this momentum of observability that you have on top of it will make it actually more graspable and more comprehensible when you're actually looking at a security event. And you see immediately what kind of an impact it can have on your solution or even your enterprise, because this is now going from one system to another, and it's using the credential theft. But if we take a look here, we can actually see that there's like here, there's a port, there's a related alert involved, and it can actually go and drill down into all the different other events. And probably at some point in time, it will reach a VM, it will get access to that VM, will create an administrator user on that VM, and before you know it, they're internally inside of your AD, and then boom, ransomware or whatever.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So there's that whole aspect that we talked about, which is prevention, which is shifting left your developer side at the very early doors of that application, building these security things, right the way through to this side, which is the proactive, well, I say reactive to a certain extent if you've got a breach going on, but you've got these, and that's, I mean, I don't know what other way to say, we've only had an hour to talk about these security tools from Microsoft, Mike, so we've kind of, I guess, talked about as much as possible in an hour, but I mean, are there any other points? Yeah, exactly, absolutely, and I fully get that, and I guess for people that are watching this video now, it's more of a case of these videos for me are around maybe just kind of opening, helping people open their eyes to the art of the possible in terms of important concepts and subject areas like security, mainly because I think. From my perspective, like I was saying to you earlier, Mike, this has been something that over the years is, I think we've all become gradually pseudo security consultants, or we've had to become those kind of security experts in our own fields. So just understanding in a little bit more detail and depth what features and functionality is available from everybody, from the dev side right the way through to those ops people is absolutely fantastic to see. So, I mean, are there any other little areas you feel we should dip into now before we close this down, Mike?
I can go on for hours on this. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, I can discuss all the different SaaS tools, code quality. I can discuss more other tools like defending the parameter with application gateway, where the importance of API management is, but. If I go into that, I think we will still be gone for like
do you know what?
5 hours.
No, you're right, and because one of those things, you start looking at the network, not the network, the security model, like we mentioned earlier, that defense in depth, and I think one thing to call out, the one thing that I see and I speak with customers quite frequently on is that cybersecurity reference architecture that Microsoft have out there.
There's a new one, by the way.
Yeah, I did spot that actually not too long ago. It got released, didn't it? So
last week. So, and it's not architecture.
Oh, was it?
Architectures, because there's multiple now.
They've got the whole zero trust. They got the zero trust in there as well, haven't they? I did notice. Yeah, I mean, that is a great diagram. If you're kind of new to the Microsoft way of viewing security, that is always a good go-to set of diagrams now, I guess. Like you say, Mike, there's more than one there. I think there's a short link, actually. I think it's something like...
aka.ms/Microsoft. Let me just...
MCRA.
Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Got it.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that's the one.
And like I say, I think, you're right. I mean, in terms of the security, I suppose those traditional network type security, right, network down to application level security elements and identity management, we could probably set up a mini series, couldn't we, Mike, and start talking around each of those. But I think this has been hopefully, viewers will agree, but this has been a fantastic kind of, overview of all those capabilities. I mean, I really can't thank you enough for jumping on and giving me that overview, Mike. It's been great.
If I can, get people to know a little bit more and just creating awareness, then I reach my goal. And I do hope that your viewers do appreciate this podcast as much as I appreciate it for the opportunity that I got. So thank you for that.
No, not at all. Anytime, Mike. I mean, it's been great, and I can't wait. Obviously, we'll be meeting again next week. We've got I know you're only doing a lightning talk next. I say next week. This video is going to go out in a couple of weeks, so it would have been. Everybody will have to look at the YouTube below now. Yeah, it's just whatever. Just no, but. Honestly, Mike, it's been fantastic. It's a pleasure to speak to you. It's been great, brilliant information. We'll see how this gets on. I'm sure it'll be received very well as I've received it anyway. But we'll call it for today then, Mike, if that's good with you.
Yeah,
it's been a pleasure.
Very pleased. Yeah, likewise. It was before we knew it, the hour was gone. So that's
it's always a
what
way.
I kind of expected. Yeah,
it's always a way, isn't it? I think what we up to now. I just clicked over the hour and 15. So there we go. That's not a bad little security overview video. I think we'll probably call that one.
Perfect.
Lovely.
So,
thanks a lot, Mike.
Again, yeah.
No pleasure. We'll catch up fairly soon.
All right. Stay safe. Bye-bye.
You too. Thanks, Mike.